The Animaniacs reboot was released on Hulu on November 20th, 2020 to the joy of the fanbase after its original run ended in 1998. From hardcore fans of the series coming back for the nostalgia to newer audiences just joining the fandom, it was truly a sight to behold watching your favorite Warner siblings jump back into action in the modern world. Now, the funny thing with fandoms is the iceberg that is associated with each and every one. Every fandom has its dark secrets, and the Animaniacs definitely isn't an exception. Around this time of the reboot, when my friends and I were watching the series, memes of Yakko, Warner, and Milk were popping up with Vivzy Pop's Attic playing in the background.
I'm addicted to the sorrow. When the buzz ends by tomorrow, there's another rush of poison flowing into my veins, giving me a dose of pleasure that resides by the pain.
And as funny as these videos were, hearing Angel Dust's voice match up with Yakko's, the most absurd part of these memes were Yakko's association with Milk. None of my friends knew what it meant, and we all wanted to get to the bottom of it. So we dove deep into the iceberg. In doing so, we came back up to the surface as different people. You guys saw the title. We have discovered the Yakko Milk fanfic that was created back in 2007, and now with the final season of the Animaniacs reboot, I am here today to bring it to light. Before giving you all a synopsis on this cursed piece of literature, I'm going to give a major content warning. This story contains themes of depression, imposter syndrome, mental illness, suicide, and much, much more. If these are sensitive topics for you, I recommend not reading the actual fanfiction, as it is actually really well written, but tackles these topics to the extreme. My video will only be an overview of the story, so I will try to limit the graphic content mentioned, but I could only condense so much. You have been warned. With that out of the way, sit back, grab your snacks, and get cozy as I tell you the 8-chapter story of Big Brother's Responsibility, aka the Yakko Milk fanfic. Chapter 1. Where do we go from here? We begin our story with Yakko looking through the Warner's fridge for food, only to find milk. From there, we learn right off the bat that Yakko is lactose intolerant, as he and his siblings learned that the hard way at a studio party. We also learn that the Warner siblings have hit harder times after the show has been cancelled, as Wakko is literally eating them out of house and home, and the Warners are running out of money. Yakko feels this weight on his shoulders as he is the oldest, thus he is responsible for ensuring that his siblings got everything they need in order to live. Because of the lack of food, he begins to feel that weight become even heavier, and he feels as if his life is crumbling around him and that he isn't a good older brother. Wakko and Dot begin getting into an argument about the lack of food in the fridge. As Yakko tries to intervene and de-escalate the situation, Dot snaps at Yakko and criticizes how he always plays hero, whenever she and Wakko had gotten in an argument, to which Wakko silently agrees. As Yakko tries to explain himself and how he doesn't want them fighting, Dot continues and breaks it down for him. They can solve their fights on their own, and don't need him to as they won't always need a big brother there to help them out. As Dot and Wakko leave, Yakko is left in the kitchen with his thoughts and to mull over what was said. To him, everything confirms that he is a bad older brother. While zoning out, he pours himself a very full glass of milk and chugs it all down, which he only realizes what he has done after the deed was complete. Later, Dot realizes what she did was kind of a dick move and she decides to apologize. She finds Yakko in his room curled up into a ball and notices that he is crying. Yakko then rolls off the bed in agonizing pain, and Dot rushes to grab Wakko. They realize that Yakko had drunk milk, and decide that it's their turn to take care of their older sibling. Chapter 2. O Warner, where art thou? The next day, Yakko is still recovering from his horrible error, and the Warners receive a phone call from Dr. Scratch and Sniff. He sends the Warners food, which makes Yakko feel agitated, as he feels threatened by Dr. Scratch and Sniff's assistance compromising his status as Big Brother, and believes that they'll be able to get back on their feet on their own. After a good meal and reassurance that his siblings had eaten, the Warners receive another call from Dr. Scratch and Sniff, which Yakko answers with envy. They had scheduled an appointment as a way to pester Dr. Scratch-a-Sniff, but for the entire time, Yakko was zoned out and wasn't himself. While he zones in and out, he realizes that they've been talking about how he's been acting differently for the entire interaction. Yakko then blows up at all of them and heads back to the water tower. As Dot and Wakko head back, Dot expresses her concerns and Yakko yells at them again. Dot begins to genuinely cry, and Wakko is left to process what had just happened. He knows that something is wrong with Yakko, but he needs to stay strong for his younger sister and not break like his brother. Chapter 3. His Greatest Nightmare. This chapter begins in the perspective of Dr. Scratch-a-Sniff as he realizes that Yakko Warner was beginning to show symptoms of a mysterious illness. We see what was actually being said at the therapy session. How Wakko, despite being the one that doesn't talk much, is taking lead of the conversation, and how Yakko was spacing out. Wacko and Dot describe all the reactions Yakko has been having, and Dr. Scratch Sniff takes notes, being mindful to keep a close eye on the Warner siblings, Yakko especially. We then see the perspective of Yakko zoning out in the dark. He sees two figures right next to him, tormenting him that everyone is becoming more suspicious of Yakko, that Scratch Sniff is going to be upset if he finds out, and how humorous the figures find the situation. As Yakko tries to leave from the situation, a third figure appears to torment him further, to which Yakko threatens to talk to Scratch and Sniff. The three figures then allude to how that choice could lead badly for his family, and pin him down. The three figures are revealed to be creatures that look like Yakko. Tall Yakko, Middle Yakko, and Little Yakko. The three press him to change now before his siblings suffer for it, and Tall Yakko creates illusions of Yakko's siblings crying, screaming, and dying. The illusions end, and Yakko is left with adrenaline and anxiety, and his siblings walk in to see what's wrong. With his newfound advice ringing in his head, he decides to shut up and cry in their arms, holding them tight. Wacko and Dot realize that they cannot leave Yakko alone like this, and spend the night with him as he sleeps so he knows that they are safe. The next morning, Yakko does not speak a word, despite what Wacko and Dot tried to do. The two then have to leave Yakko to talk to Scratch and Sniff, leaving Yakko at the water tower deflated for lying to his siblings and not saying anything to be a good big brother. We switch over to the appointment as Dot and Wacko tell Scratch and Sniff Yakko's situation, to which he becomes more worried about. As Wacko and Dot head back to the water tower, they have been told by Scratch and Sniff to go home and make sure that Yakko is okay and to bring Yakko with them to the visit next time. Once they return, Yakko is nowhere to be seen. 2 days pass, and Yakko is still missing. Wacko and Dot ask everyone possible if there has been any sight of him, but nothing turns up. Yakko's disappearance affects both the remaining Warner siblings, with Wacko becoming more outspoken and Dot becoming more distant from everyone else besides Wacko. The weight of Yakko's disappearance lies on everyone, as everyone knows that if he isn't found soon, neither will the remaining Warners. Chapter 4 Without You. We begin with a phone call between the LAPD and Scratch and Sniff. The police inform Scratch and Sniff that the Yakko case is no longer a high priority for them, as he has been missing for 2 weeks with no leads. We switch over to Wacko and Dot, as they just received a phone call from Scratch and Sniff to talk. A long description is given of how Yakko's disappearance had affected both of the Warner siblings, how they no longer joke around, rarely leave the water tower, and don't let each other out of each other's sight for more than 5 minutes. We see a memory of Dot having false hope, mistaking someone as Yakko, which absolutely shatters her. On their way to visit Scratch and Sniff, they hear noises from an alleyway. They don't think too much of it until they hear a cough, of which they decide to cautiously investigate. They discover a disheveled Yakko, muttering to someone invisible to not take them away again. Wacko sends Dot to find Thaddeus Plots to help while he stays with Yakko. As she rushes to Plots, Yakko starts panicking, worrying about where Dot went, which heavily affects Wacko. We switch to Plots' point of view, as he is dealing with all the press surrounding Yakko Warner and the accusations about it. Dot bursts into his office crying, and frantically explains the situation. Plots becomes a better man, and he does everything he can to help the Warners, and because of his efforts, help will be arriving, making Plots be the first person to make Dot smile since Yakko's disappearance. We're going to take a quick intermission as we're halfway through the fanfiction since it only gets more mentally draining from here. When my friends and I first read this, we went straight on with no break in sight, and I'm being completely honest when I say this, but this has mentally changed my life forever. And on that note, I have given my friends who went through the experience with me a moment to express their thoughts on the Yakko Milk fanfic.
Okay, I'm gonna try not to make this super long, because there's a lot of stuff you can say about the Yakko Milk fic. I remember reading it for the first time and being kind of I don't know, I've been on the internet long enough to where I've seen a bunch of shit and I'm not super upset by anything anymore, but that kind of was weird in some way. I don't know, it's such an odd thing to exist because there's so much intricate detail that goes into it, but it's about the fucking Animaniacs. So I don't know, especially because I think I was already really getting into the Animaniacs at the time because of the reboots. So it was just weirdly that affected my perception of them afterwards. But it's definitely a fanfic that exists on the internet. It's not the weirdest fanfic I've ever read. I think I've definitely seen more odd stuff, but just something about it makes it so much its own thing that it's really hard to talk about without really getting deep into it and explaining everything. It's like one of those things, like, if you know, you know, but that's neither here nor there. So yeah, that's what I think of the Yakko Milk fanfic. Oh, what the fuck?
Honestly, I'm in a state where there's not enough words to describe what it felt like to sit there and expose myself to the Yakko Milk fanfiction. Like, there's not enough words, and yet there's also not enough time to explain how it makes me feel. Like, there's no good amount of time. There are no ways to express the range of emotions that I got hearing that fanfiction being read to me in a call. Like, it was just, why was it so dark? Why did it get so depressed? Why was it actually kind of shockingly written well? Why was there all these nuanced and complicated emotions, the mental health stuff, the weird thing with, like, the sibling dynamics and, like, the failure to compose himself and be the older brother? Why Yakko? Why Milk? I don't fucking know. It's it's weird, and I'd read it again. I would.
Thank you for joining me on this journey. From here, the story gets a lot darker and contains the most of those trigger warnings I mentioned earlier. So be warned, and let's get back into the story. Chapter 5, Fetus Steps. The beginning of this long chapter focuses on Wakko with Yakko in the alleyway. The two have a small conversation where Wakko softly explains what is happening, and Yakko drifts to sleep. Yakko then shoots up in a panic, exclaiming how the siblings need to get out of here, and wonders what happened to Dot. Confused, Wakko explains to Yakko that Dot went to grab help. At that moment, an ambulance appears with Dot, Dr. Scratchesniff, and Mr. Plotz. Dr. Scratchesniff brings Yakko over to the ambulance, and while he's in there, he cries out, causing Wakko and Dot to rush over to see him being held down by the EMTs. Wakko and Dot argue to be with Yakko, and as the EMTs attempt to drive off with him, Yakko goes into hysteria that he doesn't want to be alone. Scratchesniff is furious with the EMT's decision and comes to the defense of having Wakko and Dot with their brother. He is successful, as the EMTs allow the Warner siblings to ride with Yakko, and they ride off to the hospital. Flash forward a week ahead, and Yakko has been kept at the hospital. As he is laying in his bed, Pinky and the Brain make an appearance to visit him. Yakko is skeptical as to why they care, but Brain assures to him that they are simply there to wish him well. Before they leave, Pinky gives Yakko some insight, talking about his own sister and how he feels lucky to have her despite not seeing her. Pinky doesn't actually have a sister. We then get Yakko's opinion of Dr. Scratchesniff's visits, and how he dislikes them as they make him feel like a test subject and how he is being looked down upon. As Dot returns to visit her brother and asks how he's doing, Yakko responds with a hurtful passive-aggressive response. The two begin to argue, and Yakko reveals that he has been strapped to the bed and that this is due to the hospital's belief that he is a danger to himself. Dr. Scratchesniff enters then, and Yakko continues to be rude to Dot. Scratchesniff decides to escort Dot out, and Yakko begins to panic again as the advice to stay quiet rings again in his head. It's revealed that one of the figures that talked to him is named Reynold, and Yakko feels that he was right, beginning to panic even more and demand that Dot is brought back so he can apologize. Nurse runs in to inject some sleep medication, and Yakko drifts off to sleep, pleading for a chance to see his sister again. Dr. Scratchesniff brings Dot back to the water tower, explaining to her how Yakko had tried to run out of the hospital frequently, and that the two should stay home for a while. As Dot re-enters the water tower, she is met by Wakko in the kitchen, and the two have a conversation about her visit. Wakko expresses a pessimistic thought of Yakko being tired of them, and as Dot leaves in optimistic denial, Wakko sadly reminisces on good memories with their brother and questions if it is possible to bring back their older brother. Chapter 6, The Hows and Whys of One Yakko Warner. We are introduced to a new character, Dr. Jesse Pawneal, the other doctor Dr. Scratchesniff called in to assist in the Yakko Warner case. He calls Scratchesniff to inform him that he may have the results of what is happening, and Scratchesniff assigns Pawneal to help Wakko and Dot understand what is happening. As he is getting ready to leave, Pawneal receives a call from a mysterious voice asking him if everything is set and that they only have one shot. In 1 hour, Pawneal is about to have a busy day. Pawneal visits Yakko in his hospital room before talking to Scratchesniff. He quietly removes his restraints, which wakes Yakko up. After the two have a brief chat, Dr. Pawneal asks Yakko to stay positive before Pawneal leaves. We follow Pawneal to his appointment with Scratchesniff, the Warners, and Pinky and the Brain. Handing everyone folders, it is revealed that Scratchesniff called in help and was sent Pawneal to help with the Yakko project, and that Pinky and the Brain have assisted in it. For a brief moment, we get a glimpse of Yakko with his thoughts, and relishing the fact he was free. he quietly makes his way to where he wants to be, a stairwell of which he begins to ascend. Yakko just wants to disappear. Switching back to the main group, Brain reveals that he was using flowers to spy on people through his surveillance system, and the sunflower they gave Yakko was a tricked-out version of that idea, which would feed off and detect Yakko's emotions as well as keep an eye on him. They would always know what was going on and how he was feeling. However, at that moment, when they decide to have a live demonstration, the screen shows blue, and Ponyo's pager goes off to inform him that Yakko has gone missing. As the group is rushing back to the hospital, Ponyo attempts to defend his actions while Wakko expresses his distaste of Ponyo, using his brother like an experiment. Dot expresses how she trusts Ponyo and reads the folder given to her by him. The folder contains a long list of possible disorders Yakko Warner has: separation anxiety disorder, depression, intrusive abnormalities of awareness, and much, much more. Ponyo's pager goes off again. Yakko Warner is on the roof. We then cut to Yakko's point of view as he is watching over the streets of Glendale. The voices in his head, known as the 3 R's, begin to once again torment Yakko, tearing him apart, using his siblings leaving him as the recurring factor. Dr. Ponyo appears to try and reason with him, bringing Scratch and Sniff, Pinky, and the Brain along with him. Yakko doesn't pay attention to anyone there except Pinky, who assures to Yakko that the emotions his siblings are feeling are not because of him, but because they just want their big brother back. At that moment, Wakko and Dot enter the rooftop, which Yakko is skeptical of the reality of, but confirms to be true as they held his hands. He has a mental battle with the 3 R's, but eventually he gets the words out to ask if he could go home. Chapter 7. Not Broken. Everyone falls quiet by the question posed by Yakko Warner. Ponyo and Scratch and Sniff break it down to Yakko, saying that if he wants to be let go, he would need to stay for one more night because of the current situation. Ponyo asks the Brain to monitor Yakko for one more night, and also requests Dot to watch Yakko and let him know his status after he is allowed back home. If he relapses, then Yakko must return to the hospital for psychoanalysis. As Wakko and Dot are let out, Yakko resists his urges to scream out for them, and the 3 R's begin to pester him again as he goes to sleep. On the ride home, Wakko and Scratch Sniff have a down-to-earth talk about Wakko's role in the family, and that Scratch Sniff believes Wakko would be able to take over for Yakko. Wakko and Dot re-enter the water tower, and as they ease back into their home, they are able to goof off with each other and somewhat return to normality. The chapter ends with Wakko singing to Dot before both of them fall asleep. Chapter 8. Tangled. We follow Yakko into his dream from the last chapter. Here we are finally introduced to the 3 R's, the tall one being Reynold, the middle one being Ruben, and the smallest one being Russell. The 3 harass Yakko about being scared to go home, digging into his insecurities and guilting him to stay at the hospital. Yakko denies everything they say, which angers the 3 R's and leads them to deceive him into thinking that they are actually trying to help him. Yakko then has a dream of him falling off the water tower and meeting a terrible demise. He wakes up back in the hospital room. He finds a picture of his family taped behind the picture Pinky had given him and remembers the situation associated with it. Wakko had suffered from hypoglycemia and put a panic into Yakko and Dot. When he was admitted into the hospital, Wakko was also diagnosed with appendicitis alongside his hypoglycemia. He remembers never leaving Wakko's side and how Dot had to pressure him into taking care of himself after seeing Yakko having not eaten or slept in 4 days. When Wakko had the good to go for going home, Yakko had called Scratch and Sniff to drive them home, and once Scratch and Sniff had dropped them off, they began to pester him like normal. The flashback ends, and Yakko is left reminiscing in distaste. He wants to go home only because he doesn't want to be in the hospital. However, he doesn't feel ready to take on the responsibility of being the big brother and doesn't want to have that responsibility at all anymore. Sitting in the hospital room without any motivation from the 3 R's, Yakko returns to being depressed, and he himself had the thought of disappearing again. During this time, Pinky and the Brain had been watching Yakko from their lab, and the charts and graphs monitoring him had been slowly dropping. Brain expresses how the situation is just getting worse, and even Pinky is aware of what was happening. The next morning, Yakko had contemplated roaming the hospital, but decided against it. He was excited to go back home. Dr. Ponyo later enters. He received a phone call from Brain about what the 2 mice had witnessed on the monitors and observing him this morning. Yakko has looked worse than ever. When Ponyo mentions his return home, Yakko shoots up at the thought of his siblings. Not the reaction Ponyo wanted. Back at the water tower, Wakko and Dot are anxiously awaiting their older brother's return. The 2 acknowledge that things may not ever go back to the way things were. but Wacko bluntly tells that to Dot, which upsets her. She then remembers Ponyo's task given to her and tries to look for the card. She is interrupted by Wacko apologizing for upsetting her, and he clearly explains to her that they have to step up and take care of him so they don't lose each other. Wacko had taken up his spot as big brother much more seriously, and the two make up. Wacko is getting driven home by Ponyo and Scratchesniff. Many thoughts raced through his head, but the main thing crossing his mind was getting away from the doctors and the hospital. As they return back to the studio, Yakko has worries about how this whole experience had affected his relationship with his siblings. Ponyo drops them off and leaves only Yakko and Scratchesniff to go to the water tower. Yakko is keeping account of this. Once the two make it to the top of the tower, Scratchesniff leaves and Yakko is left alone in the living room to sit on the couch. Dot and Wacko calmly leave Dot's room to greet their older brother back from the hospital, but Yakko is devoid of any drastic emotions. When Yakko decides to split off from them to go to his own room, Dot worries that Yakko isn't happy to be home. But Wacko tries to assure her that he'll adjust soon. Yakko sits on the floor next to his bed and remains in silence. The awkwardness surrounding his siblings was bothering him, and the three R's haven't appeared since he had left the hospital. Stressing about everything that had just happened and worrying about what it would mean in the future, Yakko comes up with an idea to make everything go back to normal. He decides to use his acting skills to believably fake happiness and return to his former self. Yakko Warner will try to give the best performance of his life. This is where the story ends. For now, at least. The author of the story, Mimi0204, has left this story on pause for over a decade, and as of December 2nd, 2020, due to the internet rediscovering the story, she said she would finish the story. Yet, still hasn't to this day. If by the off chance Mimi0204 does see this video, a little someone I know whose name rhymes with Pantsless Rajamas has many questions about you and this story, so I'd love to set up an interview between y'all. So, if you're interested, hit us up on Twitter. Guys, please don't go harassing her for this, please. Big Brother Responsibility is an oddly well-written story that covers a common pressure that many oldest siblings have to carry, being a pillar of strength for one's family. Even more so when siblings are all you have. The sense of imposter syndrome has been more outspoken about and addressed these days, and Big Brother Responsibility is an early representation of it. I'll end off this video on this note. Mental health is a serious issue, and if you or a friend are in times of crisis, don't be afraid to reach out for help. There are plenty of resources out there to support you, and all of it is there to help you on your path of mental healing. You are valued, and it all gets better from here. Thank you guys so much for watching until the end of the video. I know I've kind of gone on a bit of a 2-year hiatus, and trust me, that wasn't intentional, but as I said before in like my most recent videos recently, I've been busy with college, so, you know, what can I say? A big shout out to all the guest artists that worked on this video. I genuinely could not have gotten this video done without them. So, in order of appearance, thank you to Rabaka-chan, Waldo, ChipChap, and Sophia Static for pretty much carrying this video with your awesome drawings and awesome storyboards. Special thank you again to ChipChap and Pantsless Pajamas for also providing their testimonials. It was a pretty funny thing to ask of you guys to relive the moment. But thank you for really adding to the video. Thank you to everyone who has sent fan art to me. I have such a big backlog to go through. So the ones shown on screen is only a fraction of what I have left to show everyone. But I want y'all to know that I appreciate and love every single piece of fan art that I get. With that being said, if you'd like to send me some fan art, feel free to follow me on my social medias as shown on the screen and send them me there. Maybe you guys will be featured in the next video, whenever that is. I got big plans for the future, big plans, and I know I've been saying that a lot, but trust me, they're big. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!